the airport in 2 weeks. Uh, Here we are looking at the Clark and the seaport there in Manila International Container Port will be used. It's strong enough. Uh, the issue is that we don't have an airport south of Pasig River. Uh, that might be damaged yung NAIA. But we have a big port in Batangas. If you've seen the presentation earlier of MMDA, they have a sectored Metro Manila that might be isolated somehow. But the responding units from north and south have already identified their avenues of approach, but not all roads will be cleared immediately. I've seen MMDA work in Tacloban, but let me tell you, I've seen the earthquake damage in Kobe in the museum, and I've seen the damage of the storm surge in Tacloban in real life, and it's almost the same. What is common is that the clearing of debris from which we could clear the road and use transport is quite a very challenging task. Just to clear debris from one road, it took a lot of time, even for Metro Manila with all their equipment there, just to clear a particular road. It's very difficult with all the electrical posts, so many debris in there. It's not easy just to clear. So our issue here is how long are we going to restore? How long can we restore operability of this road? So we have now the area business continuity plan, for which we have to thank the Japanese International Cooperation Agency working with MMDA. But we have finished the plan early this year, but they're not happy. We have to fine-tune the plan. We will improve it so that our recovery time objective will be shorter. It's a work in progress, but there's progress.
Thank you, General. Sure. Well, now you see the difficulty in reconstructing houses and buildings. So the solution is not to reconstruct, but to strengthen and prevent new houses to be constructed improperly. If you look at the recovery of lifelines, the easiest recovery will be for communication and electrical power, as long as our power plants are okay. I don't think our power plants outside of Manila will be affected. Longest recovery will be on the water. Okay, and our only big supply of water is Angat Reservoir, Angat Dam, which is very near the West Valley Fault. So this will also be fixed. So there are many things that need to be recovered or reconstructed after a major event. So it's really easy to just strengthen many of these things, because it's 2.3 trillion pesos, excluding infrastructure, for us to rebuild these houses and buildings that will be damaged.
Yes, I was about to say that in our many years of recovery work in the Red Cross, we really recommend that we do a preventive measure. So before the disaster will happen, reinforcement must be done on roofing, on structure, and whatsoever. There should be guide given to people. But we've been working more with people in the rural areas, in the communities, and we have introduced a participatory approach on safe shelter awareness. PASA, we call it PASA, participatory approach on safe shelter awareness. So it means that the community people, the beneficiaries, they participate in reconstructing or reinforcing their houses. So there's a diagram that we introduced to them And the Red Cross is also chairing the UN cluster for shelter. So these are, we use the international standards on this. For Typhoon Haiyan recovery as support to the government's overall recovery program, we have committed to construct and repair 90,000 homes. As of today, we have completed 57,000 homes. But I think the secret of it is that we must involve the local people. We must involve the beneficiaries in reconstructing their own homes. Thank you.
Just wanted to connect that same question on, Mr. Orr here. There's a lot of talks about, response and, I'm sure you have a number of clients over here, and you've discussed this and say, in this kind of an event, in this kind of a level, how is Oracle plan to respond into this? Is there a team set up here in Metro Manila to respond to this kind of potential disruption in operation?
I think I can't really talk about Oracle globally. Certainly locally there are procedures in place. The Oracle office, as most of you know, well actually there are two offices. One is in the Zweig building, which one of the most modern buildings in Metro Manila, so I'm assuming that one would be well protected should anything happen. And then we have some offices. We have an Oracle University office in Taguig in Fort Bonifacio. Again, one of the key points which has been raised by some of the other speakers is really about protection of employees. So the company does have very strong policies towards protecting the employees, not only when they're at the place of work, but should a disaster of significant magnitude occur in Metro Manila. So, in terms of the detail, not really my space, but as a global corporation, they do have great concern for their employees, as I'm sure all of the BPO companies in Metro Manila. That is one of your primary. That is your primary resource. You got to make sure that these people are protected, and in the event of a significant disaster. One of the things I would like to comment about, it's more in my domain, is this sort of looking at things from a key infrastructure perspective in the Philippines, key communications infrastructure perspective. Now, one of the things I would ask the audience to think about is how do you change the culture towards risk? Now, I work across Southeast Asia. I do business in Myanmar, I'm resident, and I do business in Singapore. And obviously, I lived in the Philippines for about 5 years. There is a very diverse range of attitude towards risk. And I think the best example in terms of a model that works is in Singapore. I mean, as recently as either late 2013 or 2014, there was an unfortunate fire at the Bukit Panjang Singtel's facility, which caused a fairly large fiber outage in certain parts of the island. What was interesting was how it was handled. First of all, the regulator was involved immediately. It wasn't left as a private enterprise issue. It became an issue about key public communications infrastructure. The government was also involved. The Minister for Communications was involved. They did a very detailed root cause analysis, and they got to the bottom of what happened. And they forced Singtel to come back with recommendations and assurances in terms of policy and procedures, but also in terms of infrastructure, what they were going to do to introduce redundancy and extra resilience in terms of that key infrastructure. So you have an example here where the question I would pose to you is there a more prominent role possibly from the NTC to have enforcement towards more rigorous planning and installation of resilient communications networks. I don't have the answer to that. I can only give you an example from Singapore. I do point out to you there's a cultural aspect to this. That's the attitude towards risk. But it is I pose the question, and it's one that maybe you want to think about.
Listening
Thank you.
about incident response, incident recovery as the plans for MMDA and the Red Cross. But then again, I'm not hearing about reduction of losses. How do we reduce loss when we are in fact projecting 300,000 plus casualties in Metro Manila? Why are we going to hear the government trying to decentralize government agencies, government work away from Metro Manila, and trying to entice businesses like us to move away from Metro Manila? Because first and foremost, I think that's the most important plan that we must do to reduce loss. So how can we reduce loss? 300,000 plus is assuming on 12 million people. If we have 6 million people in Metro Manila, that would be 150. And I think if that earthquake comes, and we all accept it now that it will come in our lifetime, I do not think we will recover Metro Manila. Metro Manila will be dead. So, are we going to
Okay,
hear...
sir. In my presentation, I specifically mentioned the purpose of providing this scenario is for planning. I specifically mentioned that we have to protect our government and economic systems. The first thing is to decentralize national agencies away from Manila. So there is a plan, but whether it will be done, it's another thing, right? So the thing is, we need to make sure that we need to convince political leaders, and whoever will run in the next Senate maybe should take a look at this. He's not around, so I cannot advocate for this right now, but perhaps the general manager can mention this. So advocating for the decentralization of Metro Manila has been my goal. And if you've noticed, the business sector in Pampanga, the Pampanga Chamber of Commerce and Industry, whenever I'm invited, they will wear this t-shirt, Decongest Metro Manila. Because decongesting Metro Manila will reduce the potential exposure that would mean lesser number. So to decongest Metro Manila, we need to establish economic centers. Maybe contact centers should also decongest away from Manila. And so decongesting Manila is not simply government, but of course, the infrastructure available for you must be good, right? So the projected casualty is 30,000. And I've been mentioning that to reduce this is to really reduce the infrastructure losses, strengthen the houses and buildings. And that's why I'm advocating for everyone to really look at this. Recovering Manila will happen after a major earthquake. I'm not sure when, but if we start by decongesting things and stop the growth of population and the houses here in Manila, then it will be a good start. And perhaps, again, in companies, I advocate that you look at the housing of your employees. The housing of your, if we can all do that, I mention this every time I talk to big companies. And they will always say their employees are their priority. If they follow what I suggest, then a big part of the Philippine population will be safe. Because we are only very few in government. More of us would be working in the private companies. So if companies are really into business continuity and all of us would want to help in reducing the risk, start by making sure that your employees' dwellings are safe. I think all of you are living in a good, strong house. But how about the rest?
I would like to focus on doctors, your suggestion in minimizing risk and putting more importance on the need for us to really understand the framework of risk management. And I would really adhere to Mr. Neil's suggestion. If we can come up with a framework, integrated framework from the different government body to make sure that yes, Philippines is actually ready. Because why? We have an obligation to our clients that yes, Philippines actually is prepared, and we're using this risk management approach. And this risk management approach should be integrated across the different organizational unit. And when you look at the risks, the number one factor that you have to consider is, you've already mentioned, sir, is really to relocate the people who are already located in those high-risk areas. But from a business perspective, we need those plans to make sure that we would be able to guarantee to our clients that we are prepared, and this is what the government, or the support that we're getting from the government. Okay, and if we can have that, it would
Okay,
it would be.
if you allowed me to talk for 2 hours, then you could have listened to me talk about risk management for the whole country. But time is limited. So there are available plans for that.
Can you share that, Ho? Because we really need that.
Well,
as
then
a
you need to
reference
invite me
for-
again at some point. No, just kidding. No. I have a better way of risk management where everyone should understand. It's not only those who think about it, but also those employees. I have been talking to my colleague here on the left. If people are taught of how to produce healthy babies or to protect their bodies in high school, we are not taught of how to construct stronger and earthquake or wind resistant houses in school. This is within the knowledge of the professionals. But if we just read and translate the building code into something that is very simple, then every one of us who are constructing our own houses would know which aspects of construction we should make sure that we supervise. So I think the educational system can really help. The other thing is, do you have an earthquake evacuation plan in your own houses? Who has? Or maybe at least discuss this with your family members. I've been suggesting to DepEd and other schools that I have kids, and every time the assignment is so difficult, like constructing a wooden magazine rack, of course the student cannot make it. If these are girls and small, the father would do it for them. Why not give an assignment to have prepare an evacuation plan with the parents, with the siblings, and submit this to the school so that we can force the families have their own evacuation plan. But I think DepEd is not the only way. If I'm the head of the contact company, I will require all my employees to have an evacuation plan. If not, don't rehire them.
We need to improve existing urban planning strategies to survive a disaster, or do we have to make a new one for Metro Manila? What do you think?
Definitely, there's a lack of urban planning and implementation in Manila. One thing is it's not clear because per our law, local government code, planning is left at the municipal and city level. But disasters don't recognize political boundaries. For example, what's happening in Quezon City will affect San Juan, will affect Mandaluyong. So there really is a need for a metropolitan-wide plan. But if you look at it, we talk about Metro Manila. The whole time we talk about Metro Manila, we think it's a 17 cities. But I think a lot of us here have employees or colleagues who live as far as Bulacan, Cavite, Pampanga. So we should look at what we call the mega Manila area, which also increases the risks, by the way, because you have a bigger geographical area to consider in terms of disaster planning. So we need to improve urban planning. So at the metropolitan level, not just at the municipal level. Also in terms of responsibility, because actually the MMDA doesn't really have a clear implementing power in terms of land use and zoning. So we really have to improve a lot of things in terms of planning and land use. And per our conversation earlier also with Director Solidum, if you remember what happened in Tacloban, apparently we really weren't prepared, and it taught us that we're not prepared for disasters. And we tend to be reactive rather than proactive. So let's remember, for every dollar you spend on disaster prevention, you save $5. So how about having a metropolitan-wide planning which includes disaster resiliency and reconstruction even before the disaster happens? There's this group called Grosvenor based in the UK, and they study the different risks of countries all over the world. Philippines was ranked, if I remember right, 47 as the highest risk, but 49 in terms of resiliency compared to California, the state of California. It was the 36th most vulnerable, but they ranked third in terms of adaptability. We have this similar risks as California, tsunami, earthquake, whatnot, but they're prepared and they're planning ahead. So, you know, we've been talking about this again and again in different fora, different groups. Well, my request is for the private sector, because government's listening, especially to big groups such as yours. So if you really ask for this urban planning, better implementation, then perhaps all the groups in government would really listen.